Alright, so here I am still in the car. I had this neat plan for this last I video where I'd be making a cake and be like one of those baking shows on the YouTubes, but Kroger messed up my order and I gotta sit here and wait, and which means there's no time when I get home. Anyways, hope you enjoy training. Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your last lecture in the I side of things, where we're going to be covering training and development. Now, first question we're going to ask is, why do we even need training? We just spend all this money hiring folks and selecting folks. Why do we even need to train folks on the job? And how do we know what we need to train? So identifying weaknesses, and not weaknesses, but aspects of the individual that could be trained better. In order to do this, we need to talk about how people learn more generally, and then we'll go into some of the methods of, how different workers are trained, and how do we make sure that our training is actually effective. And lastly, we'll talk about less skills-based training and more don't be a dick-based training. And yeah. So you gotta ask yourself at this point, right? We're gonna spend more money on training these people. We just spent a ton of money developing these selection measures, these predictors of performance, spent a ton of money recruiting different folks and going through the whole selection process. So are we really gonna spend more money on these people? Well, the short answer is yes. Over 90% of Fortune 500 companies have some sort of training program within their organization, and within the United States, organizations spend upwards of $126 billion every year on employee learning and development. And you want to know what the average training budget is for the top 125 companies? It's like $30 million. So why spend all of this money? Well, it has to be for one reason only. It actually works.
So a couple maybe personal examples of how training worked. When I was in undergrad, I used to work at Subway, and I didn't know how to make a sandwich. It was a very specific way that Subway sandwich artists used to make it. So training can be used to develop job or organization or specific types of training. Like, I can make a sandwich at home. It's not the proper way of making the sandwich at Subway. I also used to work at this retail store, Gadzooks maybe, and there were specific ways that you're supposed to fold the clothes, like you can see here. And that's basically what training can be used for, training these job-specific sorts of skills. And organizations want to make sure to retain their employees as much as possible, and one way to do that is to offer continuous development. So if you are providing training on new technological skills or upskilling the workers, they're likely to have more organizational commitment, which means they're also likely to perform better and turn over less. And so training works out not just for developing the skills of the employees, but also retaining them over a longer period of time. So just to provide a proper definition of training, training is formal procedures that a company utilizes to facilitate learning so that the resultant behavior contributes to the attainment of the company's goals and objectives. Sounds nice and neat, but there's a bunch of different ways that we can start training. But before we do, we need to kind of understand what needs to be trained. How do we know what needs to be trained? We conduct these needs analyses. So these needs analyses can occur at multiple levels. The first level is the organizational level, or organizational needs analysis. These analyses ask, what are the short and long-term goals of the organization? Was the org accomplishing with these goals? And then you develop the training to reach whatever the goals that your needs analysis comes up with. These training initiatives are organizational wide, so it's not for a particular department or a job. These are kind of like, what does the organization need across the board? And so a lot of times it looks to change the culture of the organization. So making it more potentially a more inclusive culture, or a culture more focused on employee well-being. Effectiveness is influenced by culture. So if you have let's say you need the organizational-wide culture shift to a more learning orientation, so people are more receptive to feedback. If you have that shift in culture, then individuals are going to tend to perform better. I know words. I haven't gotten through a slide yet still without screwing up. Anyways, culture where training isn't valued is problematic, because as we learned previously, if something isn't valued, it's not going to be effective. There's also training needs, task needs analysis. How many times can I mess up on the slide? Let's keep count. All right. Training needs analysis. So what are the task requirements of the job, or the KSAOs needed? Usually this comes from a task-oriented job analysis. So this shows how selection and training can fit together. There may be some things that you're unable to select for, but are required by the task, and in order to get someone up to the appropriate level that they need to be on, you need to conduct a training analysis and then train them on those particular skills. It deals with both human capital. It deals with both human capital and the experience of the organizational member that provides the competitive advantage or unique aspects. You can also have a person needs analysis. So if the task needs analysis is focused on the task itself, the person needs analysis is focused on the worker. So how well all incumbents are doing their work, it used to identify strengths or weaknesses of a particular worker. Usually you use performance appraisal data or self-nominations to identify who needs training. For example, Georgia Tech offers a lot of leadership training or teams training in order to help you work better in teams or become a better leader. Those are examples of more person-based training. And then you have this demographic needs analysis. So what does the demographic make up the organization? Are there specific needs that need to be addressed? Technology for older worker training is one of them. Honestly, technology is moving so fast that age probably doesn't have any less to do with it now. Training for employees with disabilities, or redesign of existing training programs to accommodate those individuals who may or may not be disabled, because you want to make sure that you are careful and not discriminating against any employees based upon any of their demographic or physical abilities.
So assuming these needs analysis actually tells you what needs to be trained, right? It's important to understand how you go about training these folks, and to do so effectively, you need to understand the learning context, which is three main components we're going to be talking about. Instructional design, which is how the structural components of the environment facilitate learning. Principles of learning, what does it actually mean to learn? And learner and trainee or trainer characteristics. So how do differences in people affect their likelihood of learning in a training environment? So let's start off with instructional design.
So instructional design is exactly what it sounds like. What is the design of the instructions? All activities are developed and coordinated to support the trainees' learning processes. And there are some important elements, right? You need to determine what the heck needs to be learned. Learning can be categorized generally, these learning elements, can be categorized into generally, there's a cognitive, knowledge need to be learned. Is it more psychomotor ability, or is it more interpersonal or social? And then you need to make sure that you have some sort of planned evaluation down the line to ensure that your training is being effective. And training being effective, and this is probably getting a little ahead of ourselves, can refer to both training in terms of, like, if I give you a test, if like your exam, right? You're going to hopefully learn a bunch in the class, and then you're going to take the exam, and you're going to ace it because you all are awesome. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to transfer that training into the real world. So those are kind of two different sorts of evaluation, mostly referred to as, like, this is more of the exam type training here. So this is kind of what I just put. IO course learning goals is what we have. A new frosting technique maybe is the psychomotor ability example, and interpersonal skills is the social example. And this is how we assess it at the end of the day. We have course assignments, sample wedding cake, and if you want to train or have some sort of evaluation for interpersonal skills, have a subjective judgment test, or getting ratings from customers. Next, we'll move on to principles of learning, which begs the question, what actually is learning? Well, learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience or practice. Now, IOs are not, we know about learning, but we know about learning because of the fields of research in, say, cognitive, experimental, and social psychology, in which we steal these things and then apply them to the workplace. So IO ecologists apply these learning principles to design and implement these training programs.
So because all of these different disciplines have done all of this work within the field of learning, we're just going to borrow stuff from them and talk about it. And we have a couple topics that we want to get through. First up, we're going to be talking about active learning. How much, so the unit of learning, like how big or how small the content is, and how that can affect learning. Oh, they're here with my groceries. All right, we're back, and I got groceries. Also, how to perceive meaningfulness can affect learning. So that if they find the learning material meaningful or not. The practicing what you've learned, as well as the potential downsides, potentially, of overlearning. And lastly, we'll talk about feedback. So let's go.
All right, well, first up is active learning. So it occurs when a trainee is engaged in the learning process. So this means that the individual, if they're engaged, they're likely going to have better learning outcomes, and they're more likely to retain the material over time. Now, how do you get folks to be more active learning? Well, some of you may be doing this now by say actively taking notes, practicing. You can't really practice now, but that's kind of what the quizzes are supposed to get at, getting you to practice some of the stuff that you've learned, or discussing the material, which I would like to see more of online. So those are some of the key features of active learning. So training can improve active learning by providing resources and activities intended to improve analysis and synthesize the information. So active learning is great, and you all should be taking notes so that you can be active learning in these lectures. Unit size is another factor to consider. Those were big units, so I can't go back. All right, whatever. Whole versus part learning is one way to think about unit size. So whole learning, where you have the whole sort of training session all at once, is better when the task that you need to learn or be trained on is highly organized, coherent, and interdependent, where you have a lot of mutually related parts to one another. However, part learning, where you learn like one thing at a time, is better when the task is complex and is easily dividable, and you need to master, say, one thing before moving on to the next. So unit size is important, but there's also different types of practice. So there's distributed practice, where training is divided into segments, usually with a rest period in between. this is kind of what some of the lectures are like, but usually the distributed practice that's given in an organizational environment is like over a course of the day. And there's also massed practice, so training that takes place all at once without breaks. And that's kind of hard to be effective, in my personal opinion, just because people need breaks, right? That's why we all have lecture breaks during these, some hour and a half sort of lectures. Another thing that affects learning is the meaningless of the material. So what if I told you no one cares? If you don't care about the material, then it's going to be hard to learn. There are ways to improve the perceived meaningfulness of the material that you're trying to train these employees on. First, you present an overview of the material, which I often do in this class. It's like, what are the questions that we're answering. Hopefully that hopefully allows you to understand the purposes and the objectives of, this class in general, but the lecture specifically. Hopefully through presenting it in an easily understandable format, using terms that you may be used to, helps you comprehend and see more meaning in the material as well. And I try to do that. I try to make it relatable using memes, but I don't know. I'm a dad using memes. I'm probably going to be ineffective at it. Anyways, there's also sequential ordering of the material. So I'll just pick and choose, for example, what we want to talk about on a particular day. There's a kind of all of the materials interrelated. We can talk about I stuff first. We talk about more of the core stuff first with intro to I/O and job analysis, and then we build hopefully upon that, kind of putting out advanced organizers, basically like we're going to be talking about this in the future along the way. So we cover I, and next we'll cover O, but don't worry about O right now. O meaning organizational site will be, don't worry about that because you have an exam coming up. So anyways, let's move on to
practice and overlearning. Obviously, I've changed my microphone because I just went back and looked at stuff. Anyways, let's talk about practice.
We're in here talking about practice. Listen, we're talking about practice.
That's right, we're talking about practice. So practice is less about, say, the practice makes perfect, just repetitively doing something. It's more about the quality of practice that you engage in. So think of it like exercise. You can exercise all you want, but if you don't have the proper form or the proper form or the kind of breaks in between, you may not be developing your muscles or getting into shape well. Obviously, this is a poor example for me because I got all of this sort of going on. But still, it's less about the practice makes perfect and more about making sure that you're engaging in good quality practice. Although there is this concept called overlearning, which is the process of giving trainees continued practice even after they've appeared to master behavior, resulting in higher levels of learning. This is making sure that the employee doesn't just do it good once, that they continue to do something well. If I hit a 3-point shot, I'm not Steph Curry. If I hit 100 3-point shots in a row, I might be closer to Steph Curry. So it's all about making sure that they have a really ingrained experience, right? So that whatever they're learning and training is there to stay. I believe lastly what we're talking about in terms of how people learn is feedback. So feedback is just, providing the knowledge of the results to the trainee. And it has 3 general purposes. First is to provide information so adjustments can be made to behaviors. And in particular, actually, I'll talk about this in a second. So you want to provide feedback so individuals can perform better or change. It makes the learning process more interesting and increases motivation to learn, which we really don't have in this sort of asynchronous recorded lecture feedback, which I miss from in-class lectures. But it helps the kind of back and forth learning process occur. Excuse me. And it leads to goal setting for performance. So, for example, if you realize that someone's faltering on something, you can set them these incremental goals that are challenging but achievable, so that they can start to improve. Some pro tips for providing feedback: it works best when it's delivered immediately following the behavior. If you take too long, you have the recency bias that comes into play. Anywho, it should be immediate, frequent, and specific feedback. Results in the best performance increases. Both positive and negative feedback are valued when it's delivered in a sensitive yet clear manner. So no one wants to eat a shit sandwich, right? Where you provide them with something good and then something bad and then something good. Really, if you're giving them positive feedback and negative feedback, there should be a purpose about it, and you should be sensitive to potentially what they are experiencing and why there may have been decrements in their training performance. I think that's all I want to say here. Let's cut to me doing something else.
It's important to realize that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach that works for training. So not only will your training program... Wow, that's terrible. There we go. Not only will your training program look different depending on factors such as the material that you're trying to train, how many people are participating in the training, and whether and how much practice that they will need. But even when a training program is designed, you'll need to think about the people involved. That is, both the employees that are going through this training and the trainers themselves.
So as I was trying to say there, basically different people are different, and you need to take these differences into consideration when thinking about how people learn and how training can be most effective. With respect to the learner, there's a really good indicator of whether or not they're going to learn is how ready they are. So the extent to which the trainee has the necessary knowledge, abilities, experiences to allow them to learn. You're not going to teach, if I was going into a medical program, you're not going to teach me surgery on the first day, right? I may be motivated, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to perform or have the capacity to learn the material because there's going to be too much that's going over my head. You need to build up to that. For example, I was doing a consulting project on how to train infantrymen on call for fire tasks, and I needed to learn all about the basics before I could actually engage and create training for these soldiers who already had this. Self-efficacy is also important with respect to training. It's a belief in the ability to succeed in training and in the job. If people don't have a good sense of self-efficacy, they're not going to learn well, and even if they do learn well, they may not translate that into the actual workplace. They also need to be motivated to learn, which kind of has to do a little bit with the meaningfulness of the material. If the employee has no desire, say, to improve their knowledge, then they're not going to want to. Training's not going to be effective. For example, if there's some material in this class that you may not be motivated to learn if you're already getting an A in the class, right? There needs to be something there, whether intrinsic or extrinsic, that motivates them to want to engage with the material. But also trainer characteristics can affect how effective your training is. So you need to, with your trainers, to establish specific objectives and communicate clearly to the trainers need to establish specific objectives, right? They can't just be willy-nilly about it, and they need to communicate these specific objectives clearly to the trainees. They need to possess a solid understanding of how people learn and the role played by the approach and style. You may be able to see that in some of your classes this semester, where this online learning environment is different, and some techniques that some professors use may not translate as well into the digital learning environment. They need to display effective communication skills. Now, this doesn't mean messing up on one particular slide, which I do often. It's more about communicating material in a meaningful way, tying it to something that the trainees will value, but also it comes with like being open to feedback and communicating through multiple means, like we have in our recap classes, hopefully, and realizing that different trainees may require different styles or different treatment from the trainer. People learn in a lot of different ways, and being open to train people in those different ways is necessary for learning to be effective.
Now, the phrase that we use to indicate whether or not training is actually used on the job is called transfer of training, which is defined as the extent to which materials, skills, or procedures learned in the training are actually taken back and used on the job by employees in some regular fashion. Notice I didn't say the effectiveness of the training itself. Now, the training, that's because just because the materials of the training were actually effective doesn't mean that they're going to be used on the job. When they're used on the job, that's actually what we like to call positive transfer. So, are you having fun there, Liam? However, it's possible that training could be successful in achieving its learning goals, but decreases employees' performance. We can have, and in that case, it's negative transfer. One example of negative transfer is, let's say that your class teaches you how to write in a certain coding language, that you're training, and then you get a job where that coding language is essentially irrelevant. When you attempt to use that coding language on the job, that's an example of negative transfer. Now, there's a couple things that you can do to increase the likelihood of having positive transfer. That's good, Liam.
So in order to have some sort of positive transfer of training, here are some pro tips, right? Maximize the similarity between the training situation and the job situation. So if you learn, the best way to do this is vestibule training, which is sometimes expensive, where essentially the training environment is very similar to the environment in which people are going to perform these tasks in. I'm trying to come up with an example off the top of my head, but so NASA has these analogs in which simulate the International Space Station. So it's like this, literally, like they go into these capsules for like 45 days. They go into these capsules for 45 days, and it looks very much like the International Space Station, and some of the same devices are there and such, so it mimics that sort of environment. And that's what you need to do. If you try and train them, say, in a desert with sticks and rocks on how to be an astronaut, it's not going to translate well to the environment. You need to provide enough time for active practice. Active practice sometimes takes time to engage in. If I'm say moving too fast through the slides, it's really hard for you all to take notes. If you all have me on 1.5 speed, which I think most of you probably do, it's really hard for you also to take notes. So maybe you want to slow it down, start jotting things down, and may help you retain the material a little bit better. there's different applications of training across different contexts. Just because you train in one sort of environment doesn't mean it's going to translate to another, so you need to take that into consideration. For example, a lot of military individuals go through this resilience training, especially in the Army. And this resilience training trains them very well to be resilient to task-oriented situations. But when they go back into civilian life, they're sometimes not resilient. So the training doesn't transfer well into being resilient in everyday life, just in these sorts of extreme situations. In fact, some of the strategies that you are provided in these resilient training can necessarily, not work, can be detrimental to how well they reintegrate into civilian life. The trainers, trainings, and managers should all work together in developing the training, hopefully, or providing feedback, or making sure that everyone has a voice in the process. It's very important to have clear expectations of the training, and making sure those clear expectations are delivered concisely to the trainees in the situation. Always provide refresher courses as well. For example, if the individual does not have the opportunity to engage in what you're training is something that has a relatively low base rate, like how to handle some sort of mistreatment in the workplace, which hopefully has some sort of low base rate. Having refresher courses of how to handle those situations helps the individuals who are trained on that retain that material, so they can use those skills to the best of their ability when the situation arises. And also provide good social support and transfer climate, encouraging individuals to use that training in their everyday workplaces. Again, an example of this would be diversity and inclusion training, right, where the manager may not really appreciate using their employees' time to go to this diversity and inclusion training. And when a situation comes up where you realize that the manager or somebody at your workplace is being exclusionary, you may not want to use those skills that you learned during the diversity and inclusion training because it's poorly looked upon by your group, maybe not the organization, but this group itself. So that's important. There's a meta-analysis by Bloom that looked at, the best trainee characteristics that improve training. So if you have high cognitive ability and conscientiousness, you're going to retain and use that training more often. Also, if you volunteer to participate in a training, so you're looking to improve yourself and then use those. Transfer climate and social support are always extremely important. If you don't have the opportunities or the comfortability in using the skills that you learned during your training, you're going to have a bad time. It's not going to transfer very well. Post-training self-efficacy, so how they feel afterwards, as well as post-training knowledge, so what they learned afterwards, are also good indicators of transfer of training. Now, I've been talking a long time on these slides, and I think it's about time for us to have a little lecture break.
So I want to share with you a quick 5 minutes workout in the morning to give you the energy you need to gently wake your body up and for you to have a productive day ahead. It is going to combine strength and also lots of gentle stretches to really wake all the muscles up. So do this first thing in the morning. It is only 5 minutes, but it is going to make a huge difference to your day. So it's time to wake up. So we want to do each workout for 1 minute each, okay? So in the morning, I want you to start by standing tall, okay? Always remember to maintain an upright position, and we want to really stretch your entire body up. So the first workout is going to be inchworm to upwards dog, okay? So start by standing tall, shoulder width apart, toes pointed forward, and just lift your arms up, okay? Hands together, stretch up, and slowly bring your body down, inchworm, okay? And really slowly get into a plank, and look up, and slowly get back. Okay, so for each workout, it is going to be for 1 minute stretch. It is all about lengthening the spine, and slowly, gently use your strength and really wake your muscles up. Look up, feel the stretch on your lower back, and slowly inch back. Good. Again, up, be aware of your breathing, stretch again, dive down, inchworm, into a nice solid plank, upwards dog, look up. It's so good to do this workout first thing in the morning to just, get your blood flowing in the body and really feel energized. Good. The second workout will be downwards dog to plank. So we want to go the reverse way. So get into a plank and go to downwards dog. Press your heels down, look between your legs, push your butt up, get into a nice plank, and solid plank back to downwards dog, okay? So keep the movement flowing, strong arms, do not hunch your shoulders, press your shoulders down, and back into downwards dog. Look between your legs, breathe, feel your back stretched out, feel your core working, your shoulders, your arms. Nice, keep going. So breathe in and breathe out into a plank. Good. Breathe in and out. Again, in, press down and out. In, heels on the floor, butt up, stretch your back and out. Few more, guys. You're doing really well. One more and out. And now maintain a plank position. What we want to do is to get into groiners, okay? So left feet to your left palm, and then back into a plank, right to your right palm, okay? And remember, again, in the morning, it's all about looking up. It's all about giving thanks. It's all about giving gratitude, and pace your breathing. Up to the sky, breathe, up, nice. So you should feel your legs, your hips, flexors stretched out, and also your inner thighs being stretched out. If you want to increase your heart rate, you can hop into the workout. So from right, hop to left, look up, and hop to right. Nice. Again, hold the stretch for a few seconds. Nice. One last one on each side. Stretch, look up, and nice. Back into a plank and just get up into standing, okay? The next workout will be squat with side stretches. I'm already sweating. So again, we want to stand tall. Tall squat, stretch to your side. Tall squat, stretch to your side. Tall and stretch. Nice. Look up again, or if you want to, look forward. Remember, when you bring your arms up, what you're doing is also opening your chest up and keeping your entire spine in a long, straight line. So no forward bend. Always remember tall squats, okay? Tall, and really squeeze your obliques and stretch it out. Nice. Squeeze. Few more. Squeeze. Keep going. This short workout will really wake your muscles up. At the same time, you will be sweating. Good. So final workout will be lunge, and we want to open up. Good. So back, lunge forward, and open up. So in the morning, it is all about bringing in all the good energy to your body and also mind. Open up, look up, stretch, and up. Open your chest, really feel the stretch on your chest and back. So I want you to keep the back leg strong and lunge back, okay? So remember, back leg strong, do not wobble, and bring it back. Be conscious of your butt muscles working, your thigh muscles working, and you will feel them even more. Good. Back, stretch, feel your hip flexors at the same time. Open up, look up, You should feel your chest and your upper back. Keep going, guys. Few more seconds. Open. Positive thoughts first thing in the morning will make a huge difference to your day and also perspective. And back. And that was your 5 minutes morning workout for you to have a productive day ahead.
And we're back. So I hope you all had a good little lecture break. You're able to take a little breather for yourself. I don't know what sort of break material I provided this time. Good planning on my part. But let's move on to training methods. So first we're going to be talking about some general approaches of how you train, and then also more organizational employee development based approaches. So let's get started with our first general approach, which is lecturing. So lecturing is, I guess, okay. It's very economical and has varied effectiveness, though, right? Better for teaching facts, acquiring knowledge, but not really effective for things like problem solving or interpersonal skills development. Usually there's a fixed time limit, like in the class, and it's not likely to include a lot of opportunities for practice over learning or feedback. I try to incorporate these things in my class, but whatever. And it's probably very economical, especially if they use these lectures after I have died or something. Anything that I produce here, I think, is technically Georgia Tech intellectual property, so they can use this, I think, whenever the heck they want. Anywho, so that's what lecturing used to look like. Now it looks like this. On-the-job training is probably the most used training technique. It's also most valued. Assumes that new employees can learn through various interactions with experienced employees, but it may lack some carefully planned training program. This was I'll give the story after I talk about the positives and potential downsides. So, a high fidelity training, you're on the job, right? You don't need a separate vestibule. What you're learning is right there in front of you. You have a good training environment. And there's lots of opportunities for practice and feedback, especially when it's provided in an informal means. Potential downside, there's a heavy reliance on the trainer. So if you don't have someone at the workplace who cares about your learning, then you're not going to learn or be able to succeed very well. Often put in place instead of a carefully designed training program because people are lazy. This was my experience when, I think it was my first job, my first real job at Einstein's Bagels, right, where I had to learn kind of everything on the fly. They gave us this really crap, kind of official training stuff, but everything from the proper way to do dishes and how to build whatever sandwich things we were supposed to be building and making bagels and stuff. All of that was more through on-the-job, unofficial training. And I had some really good trainers there, people who had worked there and wanted to see me do well at that job. I think I was 16 or something at the time. So. Other general approaches include self-directed techniques, which may be some of your classes this semester, hopefully not this one. It's self-paced to remedy identified weaknesses used in instructional material, includes programmed instruction and computer-assisted instruction based upon learning principles. Usually we have shorter training times in this environment, but there's not a lot of superior results demonstrated, so you may not be actually learning as much through these self-directed training techniques. Learning control, which I provide you, it could be a little counterproductive. It may result in less time spent on task and more in the use of poor learning strategies. So the flexibility that I provide to you with when you watch these lectures and when you take the quizzes may actually hurt your learning if you're doing, say, everything at the last second, not really super paying attention and being engaged in the material. I'm not saying you do that. I just noticed that everyone turns in their quiz on the very last day. Program instruction, is also part of it, so it includes program instruction. So it provides materials broken down into small elements, arranges materials from simple to more complex, administers a short test after each element, and gives immediate feedback. Hopefully you get that through the quizzes in this class. Another more recent general approach is virtual reality training. So a simulator designed to be as realistic as possible so that the trainees can transfer their skills easily. Used when training on equipment is too dangerous, costly, inefficient, etc. So again, this is like the astronaut training, right, where they can't just send folks up to transfer their skills and on the ISS. They have to have these analogs or similar environments in which the training transfer of training can take place. Same thing for airline pilots. You don't want people practicing flying an airplane, so a lot of times simulators are used to do this. This is also true in the medical field, heart surgery, or any sorts of surgery. Any medical training that you go through, there's going to be a this virtual reality, high fidelity environment that you'll learn. In order for this simulator, whether it's VR or kind of this other sorts of non-based in reality sort of training, in order for them to be effective, they need to have high physical fidelity, which is the extent to which operation of the equipment mimics the real world. If the equipment is not the same as what you would use on the job, that kind of hurts how well these skills that you learn in training transfer into the actual workplace, and as well as psychological fidelity. And this is really hard to do in some high-stress jobs. So psychological fidelity is basically making sure that the individuals have the same psychological experience in the training environment as they would in real life, which is hard with things like surgery or airline pilots or astronauts. The psychological experience is very, very different. Now, there's a related approach where the training is starting to become more gamified, so using gaming mechanics like virtual world, leaderboards, and unlocking achievements to train employees. A non-organizational specific indicator of this is the Peloton stuff, right, where you race against everyone in a certain group, and you have leaderboards and achievements and things like that. Google, if you're interested in how gamification is being used to train employees, Google or YouTube Richard, is that right now? Use YouTube to search for Richard Landers and gamification, and you'll find some really great talks on the topic. We're almost done with the general approaches. I think we have 3 more to go. Multimedia techniques is basically just using multimedia to improve training. It allows flexibility in presentation. For example, with this technique used in this course, you can pause this video and walk away for a little bit, come back. You can repeat it, and you can do this over and over and over again if you like. And it's usually preferred over other methods. For example, not just straight up lecturing, where the lecture is then somewhere in the ether. Also distance learning, which I guess we're doing now too, right? Delivery of educational or training material, usually through electronic means, may be provided to people at different locations at different times. That's what we're doing now. Most efficient use of high quality instructors. That's me, instruction and training resources, which hopefully I'm providing to you. Responsibility for personal success is primarily with you all in this case. So hopefully the material that I'm providing is of high quality, and you're learning the material well. And if you're not, let me know and we can work on that together. Lastly is e-learning. So training developed via the internet. Employees at remote sites sort through there's another mistake. Gosh. All right. Sort through, read, and work with information. Usually, oftentimes, this is simultaneously done where people are kind of in this online environment. Anyways, it's easy to update or change the information in this e-learning environment. For example, I am considering using some of the lectures I recorded last semester and just tweaking it a little bit for the last couple of lectures. It can be done at work or other convenient locations, and it usually helps sharing of information via discussion in groups. We're not doing that too much. I'd like to see more of that, but I need to learn how to make sure that you guys can engage in the online aspect more. It might be slightly more effective than classroom-based training, so we'll see what happens later on in this semester. It represents a trend in technology-based approaches, and there's a lot of growth in distant learning, and e-learning is staggering and has become a dominant training delivery method in the United States and other countries with respect to actual organizations. So a lot of times you're shifted to these online environments, and it's not really people don't do the in-person training anymore unless it's something that you have to, like something that you physically have to get a hold of. Oh, sorry. I thought I was done with the slide. I'm not. So I froze there just because I was waiting for the slide to change. Anyways, blended learning is a combination of e-learning and traditional approaches, which I think it would be best represented by what we're doing here now. It provides flexibility and user-friendly training programs. And now that's the last slide, and I won't freeze, and we'll cut to the next one.
Now, you've probably heard of some of these general training approaches before in just the general learning literature context. But there are also some kind of IO-specific ones that you should know about and could be very effective if used properly. Get in! No, stop.
So first up on the employee development-based sort of training approaches is orientation training and new employee socialization. Basically, individuals acquire the attitudes, behaviors, and knowledge needed to participate as an organizational member, which comes through the process of organizational socialization. Now, this can be delivered in formal means like orientation meetings, but oftentimes and most effectively, I think it's through these informal interactions on the job. So, getting to know your employees, going out for drinks, not anymore, having Zoom happy hours, maybe. Anyways, this socialization process is another way that you have more socialization with your employees. Next up is coaching. So coaching is kind of like mentoring, where supervisors provide subordinates with advice and information about current performance, discuss ideas and goals for improvement. Managers are coached, and they're also coaches. Now, the particular features that you want to work on with coaching is guidance, so providing clearly communicated performance expectations, performance outcomes, and suggestions for improvement. Facilitation, so helping employees analyze and explore ways to solve problems or enhance their own performance, and also inspiring them, challenging employees to aspire to realize their potential. Why is this in IOs? Well, oftentimes coaches are not just managers. They are actually IO psychologists who go into organizations and do some sort of executive coaching. Executive coaches is typically an external consultant who develops a relationship with mid to high level executives and earns lots and lots and lots and lots of money if you're really good at it. Next up, we have some behavioral modeling approaches. So it's based on the behavioral modeling theory and social learning theory, that most social behavior is learned through, modeling. And it's well suited for developing and improving interpersonal skills, but as the Andy Bernard GIF probably lets on, sometimes it's relatively ineffective if the individual is not cognizant of how they're interacting socially with their colleagues. Another employee development-based approach is business simulations. So business simulations occur when managers are given a brief instruction, includes fictitious company background, situation, blah, 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 like all of these sort of like an assessment center exercise, almost. These are often well received by trainees. For one, they can see the applicability to their current workplace. For two, they're generally kind of fun to do. Trainees may become involved in competition and lose sight of the general principles of what the training is supposed to do. So oftentimes these business simulations will be across, say, all departments in an organization, and that could lead to some mishaps. Kind of like the Parks and Rec example, right, where everyone takes on specific roles in a very clear simulation, but they got lost in the competition aspect of it and didn't really focus on what the goal of the entire business simulation was, which was to attain peace. Corporate universities are another way. I'm not super in favor of these, but they're like corporate classrooms with modern facilities with up-to-date technology. Allows for effective learning and transfer on site. Stem from the societal trend in which the world's industrialized economies evolved into knowledge-based societies. Some of this actually occurs through some master's programs where you have a more like executive master's program where the program itself is sponsored by particular organizations and they tell you what to train their employees on, and they send them there to get their master's in something related to business, and then they go back to the organization. The organization pays for all of it. It's a weird money-making way of within university systems.
Now, just like our criterion that we talked about ages ago, there are certain representative characteristics of a good training program. Specifically, these training programs should be relevant, reliable, sensitive, practical, and fair, just like a good criterion. Boiled down to a sentence, you want to ensure that you have a doable training program that consistently trains employees effectively on job-relevant skills, and that they aren't learning, and there aren't any learning differences based upon group status. Seems easy, right? Well, there's a couple other criteria for effective training programs that you should know and keep in mind.
So the first thing that we want to talk about when evaluating the effectiveness of a training program is Kirkpatrick's taxonomy. Now you probably recognized, actually none of these, we haven't gone over this yet. So training reactions are important, which we did go over a little bit earlier on in the semester. So training's attitude and reactions, if they like it, if they didn't like it, how much is actually learned. So these are more knowledge-based tests is another way to tell whether or not a training is effective. Behavioral criteria, making sure that those behaviors actually transfer to the workplace. And I guess most important from an organizational perspective is whether or not it actually produces results, so return on investment. So just because an employee is doing better and the training is effective, it really won't matter necessarily if there's no ROI on what they produced. Augmented framework was produced by Alger and colleagues, and it just differs a little bit. Reactions, so this reaction criteria here are categorized into affective reaction and utility reactions, which is fine. Learning is recategorized into 3 different types, so it's just more kind of broken down. You have the immediate post-training knowledge, knowledge retention measures, behavioral skills demonstration measures, which is here, and behavioral criteria has changed into transfer criteria. It's just another way to measure the same thing, and we do that a lot in psychology. But when you are trying to design a training to evaluate whether or not it's effective, it's really best done through this Solomon 4 design. So here you have, actually this is different ways of doing it. So you have this pre-post test design where you have like just one experimental group, and so you measure them on skills at time 1, then you train them, and then you measure their skills at time 2, which is, okay, I guess. But you don't have a control group, so you don't know whether or not increases in the M2, the second measurement of whatever criteria you're trying to get at, is due to the training itself or some other change that occurred. So that's where this control group comes in, right? So pre-post test design is the same thing with the control group. So you're more likely to attribute changes in this variable in this group to the training if there's, say, no differences here. But you might not get changes here. Right? One of the reasons why you might not get changes between the experimental and control group on your post tests is because something here, like with the measure, is priming them to engage in more of the sort of training behaviors. So asking them how assertive they are may prime them to be more assertive, and it may be just effective as the training that they go through. So the best way to do it is through the Solomon 4 design, which I mentioned at the get-go. You have 2 experimental groups and 2 control groups, and the only thing that differs between, say, the 2 control groups and the 2 experimental groups is that some of them don't get that measure at the very beginning. And this is the best way to determine whether or not your training is effective, but as you can tell, it's probably the most impractical and expensive way to do it, which is true about just about everything in science. So most people just rely on the pre-post design, and if they have some money and the ability, then you have the pre-post with the control group. Another consideration you may want to think of is whether the experimental and control group are at the same location. For example, if they are at the same location, you may have people in the training talking to people in the control group about what they're going through with their training, and that may artificially inflate the control group's post-test score. So you may erroneously conclude that the training is not effective when it's so effective that it's even training the control group here. So we're going to switch topics a little bit and end this discussion with talk on diversity training. So diversity training refers to issues regarding race, ethnicity, age, and gender. We'll talk about particular types of diversity management and training, and let's jump into it. So diversity training includes a lot of things, and one thing that it helps or that it is a part of is dealing with issues of sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is never good for primarily the individual involved, but it can also have some widespread implications on work outcomes. It can have, people are decreasing their performance, they're feeling burnt out. It has psychological and somatic outcomes. People are stressed more often. They feel uncomfortable in the workplace. And generally, they'll have some sort of negative effect on the organization as a whole. Prevention via training is probably the best tool against harassment occurring on the workplace, but it's sometimes not effective if people don't see the value in doing it. However, research indicates that behavioral modeling may help individuals become more sensitive to sexual harassment behavior, males and females view what dictates sexual harassment, so what sort of behaviors dictate sexual harassment differently, and that can be resolved through some sort of training. Moving on, we'll talk about diversity management and training. So demographic changes in the workforce necessitate new HR approaches to managing the workforce. Diversity becomes a bottom line issue if companies are going to be able to compete and keep the best and brightest. Almost 70% of organizations polled by SHRM provide some sort of diversity training, and it is a big training sort of industry. 60% of Fortune 500 companies provide some sort of training. However, the effectiveness of this training is often called into question. I keep saying that here, mostly because diversity training, and this is not, I don't think, what your book is going to say, doesn't work oftentimes, and is very disappointing. And a lot of sometimes providing diversity training, there's cases in the police force where diversity and inclusion training was provided. It actually increased the amount of, arrests towards African American individuals, as well as discrimination against the employees who were in the minority there. So it's very tricky to do an effective diversity and training program. The three primary goals of diversity training is to increase awareness about diversity issues, reduce the biases and stereotypes that interfere with effective management, and change behavior so that diverse workforce can be effectively managed. And there is some evidence that suggests it's effective, but it's limited, and there's also a lot of evidence that suggests it's not effective. I'm going to bring us down to a not so great note to end this lecture. Alternative approaches for diversity training is attempting to create a culture of diversity where it's not through formalized training, but more through the norms that people engage in. So relational culture in which people feel proud of their uniqueness while being socially integrated. Again, this is incredibly hard to do, and we'll talk about more about how people can do this in our leadership lecture. But it's a difficult and important topic that IO psychologists need to really move forward on and to help resolve this issue. Lastly, the effects of organizational diversity training on organizational performance has been mixed. A study of 150,000 federal employees found racial diversity was negatively related to organizational performance, but in agencies where diversity was well managed, diversity had a positive effect on performance. So employees need, again, this is kind of saying what I said earlier, employees need to believe that individuals who are hired to increase the diversity of the workforce are not just hired for diversity's sake. Diversity needs to, that's what they think. Diversity needs to be seen as valuable in providing a vast array of lived experiences which can help individuals become better and understand things. And I smell something on fire, so I'm going to wrap this up and see what the hell is burning in our house.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that lecture. Just a couple of reminders or announcements, however you want to think about it. So we have a bunch of in-person classes coming up very soon, from the 17th to the 3rd. Your discussion questions are due the 12th, not the 2nd, as the text says. It's the 12th. So let's see. Can I edit that real quick? Let's see. Boom. Boom. No, let's slide it. Boom. Ciao. Excellent. And then we're going to have our discussion class on the 17th. The same night, 11:59 p.m. Your quizzes for chapter 6, 7, and 8 are due. And then we're going to have 3 debate classes, 2 debates each, I think. And so that's like 6 debates. So that will be fun. And then following the debates, we'll have our exam review. We'll come in, we'll talk about the exam, go over it. It'll be released then. You'll have a week to complete it. In between there's a class, but that's a designated mental health day, so you don't have to worry about anything except for your mental health, which you may need to, take some time, touch some grass, all of that stuff. And then your exam is due at 11:59 p.m. on March 3rd. So if you have any questions or anything, reach out, let me know. Hope you're doing well, and talk to you soon.